try this again. Apparently the video did not have sound the first time around, so there was 4 minutes without sound. Hey, it could be worse. There are videos I have where they're like 30 minutes without sound. So this is, I guess you could say, moving in a positive direction in an odd way. There was audio stuff. The wrong speaker or the wrong sound system had started, and I defaulted it. But that's it. Let's get to the video itself. What I was saying in the video, this kind of miming of sorts, what I was trying to get across was that various members of the people who were looking at the channel or looking at the show that I did on Tulsi Gabbard, where there was an interview dealing with the association with Modi and some of the issues of Indian politics, they greatly disliked that guest. Now, the people who were most vocal about this were people who were part of the Hindu community, and they were, not silent in saying that there were problems with the person who was there. And some of it even going into context of race. Tulsi Gabbard has made this argument herself, saying that her being Hindu is being used against her for political advantage, meaning that some of the things that people are saying about her are smears that are hooked into the fact that she's a Hindu, that other people wouldn't be held to that same standard. I am sensitive to this. Now, what I mean by I'm sensitive to this, it's not that I cry on the side of the road about it. I mean sensitive in a different way. Clearly, I'm African American, and just want to check the sound, make sure the sound is right. Clearly, I'm African American with a Native American heritage also. The Native American heritage, for the most part, wasn't necessarily paid attention to growing up. Only the part that I was black. Going with that, though, I try to give a perspective as if I'm sitting on the moon looking at events. A cosmic perspective. Not a perspective purely bound within the context of culture or society, or gender or any of those things. But what's fair? What's fair in the human context of a thing that applied to one applies to the other, that type of fairness. Meaning if the United States is saying, oh my God, Russia hacked our election, you can't turn around and then do the same thing, worse, to another country. That's all. I'm talking about fairness. When I hear that argument about sexist or racist, when Hillary Clinton was using it, it was utter absurdity. They were calling Bernie Sanders sexist because Bernie Sanders was in a race against Hillary Clinton. This is, of course, lunacy. But that said, just because Hillary Clinton uses it in a flagrant way doesn't necessarily mean that each and every politician will use it in a flagrant way. There's some cases where it is a legitimate attack or is a legitimate beef to say that you're using this because of some kind of identification that has nothing to do with the policies to which I am espousing. So I have to look at it in that sense in Tulsi Gabbard's case and not necessarily be completely dismissive just because I've become a jaded asshole in covering politics. In my own sense, I'll give you an example. When Gillum was running, he was running in the race against the guy that won, Santos. And Santos started his campaign making some joke about aping around or something. It was such an odd and weird reference to make. But this goes back with a history from the standpoint of African Americans of being depicted as apes and animals and all this other stuff. And so I'm going to be somewhat sensitive when I hear someone in a political campaign doing what is an obvious dog whistle. From his standpoint as governor, he's saying something that he knows is going to try to trigger something within Gillum because Gillum fully understands it as a dog whistle. By the same token, Gillum is somewhat penalized for pointing out the fact that it's a dog whistle because, that black person and those black things. Ultimately, Santos, what he's saying is going to be filtered through the intellect and through the you could say the common heritage or the common experience that people listening to him have gone through. And if those people are African Americans, they see that as a dog whistle because their common experience has that within their experience. As opposed to whites who don't necessarily like to be called racist and are somewhat itchy about even holding Gillum to account for the dog whistle. I've seen it on my own show where people were like, no, dude, I don't know if that's a dog whistle. I'm uncomfortable calling this a dog whistle when it's clearly a dog whistle. My own context. Their context. So I don't necessarily want to be dismissive when she makes these things of people using this because of her religion, or for that matter, when people call into the show or send emails saying, this seems to be they're mischaracterizing a relationship between Gabbard and Modi, or that they're mischaracterizing Indian politics in general. So I want to be clear on that. I'm going to have a guest that come on later on. He's going to push back against some of the narratives that have been pushed forth with Tulsi Gabbard in the context of India. So there's that. And I'm trying to get another gentleman on who's further into the politics of Indian politics, and that should be an interesting thing if he comes on. But up to this point, he hasn't accepted my invitation. So I guess my point is, I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. Look, I don't cover Indian politics per se, and so this is like getting your bearings about something that's going on, and you're hearing both sides of it. My goal and my point here is to somewhat be fair, and it is possible that Tulsi Gabbard has a relationship that is not necessarily the most pleasant. If you're looking at it, especially from the standpoint of the left, they look at these things as values and morality and all this stuff and hold those things against the candidate. And have political positions that are favorable to the left. Meaning both things can be true. The person may not necessarily be a paragon of virtue, but the person may be politically advantageous to you in moving the ball forward. Both things can be true. But that's it. I want to hear opposing viewpoints on it. With that out the way, with that said, Tulsi Gabbard has released her platform. And I want to go through a few elements of this platform because as platforms go, I personally like it. I haven't gone through each and every aspect of it. I've gone through certain, you can say bright spots or things that kind of light up the moment that you deal, those red lines, like my deal breakers. Do you support Medicare for all? If that answer is no, then I am moving on. There is nothing else that need to be said. Satan himself can be running on the other side of the political sphere, and I will walk by you. So I just want to be very clear, there's a red line. That is an absolute to me. So Medicare for all, if that's a no, I have nothing else to see here. Same thing with interventionist wars. Are you going to be an interventionist president? Are you trying to scale back the American presence in the world in regards to this militaristic presence in the world? And again, if that answer is no, there needs to be an explanation for why that answer is no. I want a non-interventionist foreign policy. I don't want us going through these regime change wars. There are certain things to me that are somewhat red lines. So let's take a look at, and I know when I say that, people are going to say, well, Bernie Sanders is an imperialist. Again, some things are red lines. I need to go through the platform. But that's it. Sanders has put out bills trying to rein back, and he's even gives statements making this point that the Syrian war, the Yemen war, all those things are illegal. So let's see what the platform is. I enjoy going through some of this because this is a lefty wish list. Like Tulsi Gabbard, just to show you what I mean. This is her site. And these are all of the things. Where does Tulsi Gabbard stand on the issues? And look at all of this. And each one of these leads to a bunch of other things, meaning it allows you to delve into it. It gives bills that she signed on to, like it gives what she signed on to, what she believes in, and all sorts of stuff. So let's go through some of the bright spots, or some of the first main points. Marijuana legalization. This is somewhat of an absolute for me also, but not fully an absolute. I mean, but to be fair, anybody who I vote for is probably going to be in line with doing this anyway. Tulsi Gabbard on marijuana legalization. Tulsi strongly supports the decriminalization of marijuana. Tulsi is going to be smoking a fatty on the White House lawn. Our outdated policies on marijuana have devastated ripple effects on individuals and communities across the country. They have turned Americans into criminals, torn apart families, and wasted huge amounts of taxpayer dollars to arrest, prosecute, and incarcerate people for smoking a plant. We're going to put you in a cage for smoking a plant. An alcoholic officer locks up a guy for smoking a plant. I always found that to be amazing. Nobody ever sees the contradiction there. So, legalization, ending Federal Marijuana Prohibition Act, Marijuana Data Collection Act, Marijuana Justice Act, Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act to allow banking access for marijuana-related services. All those various states that have legalized marijuana either medically or in total, it's still illegal federally. And because it's still illegal federally, the federal government can break in and essentially arrest those people that they want. But also this issue of taxation. Those states, they need to have a pathway. And here's additional links to the things that Tulsi has said. Here's the thing. The key point, and what I wish she would have said, was that the drug war was a political hit job by the Nixon administration in order to lock up blacks and hippies because he thought they were going to be political blocs. There's this trope that people who were part of the civil rights movement were communists, and that this was some kind of Soviet subversion, meaning African Americans wanted, freedom, liberty, to be treated as human beings, all that stuff. That was some kind of Soviet subversion. Yes, this Russian trope has been used going back for like 100 and something years. It is not new. Let's keep going for another one. Medicare for all. She has it gently put on. Tulsi strenuously supports Medicare for All Act and serves on Medicare for All caucus. Tulsi believes that our present healthcare system is organized by and for the benefit of big insurance and pharmaceutical companies, is not for the American people, which must be changed. Tulsi believes that the Affordable Care Act was a step in the right direction, but points out that issues remain with the number of uninsured and high costs related to deductibles, co-pays, and medical services and prescription drugs. Tulsi is also in favor of Americans having access to affordable health care through Medicare or a public option. I guess she's saying, look, I'll settle for a public option, but I strongly support Medicare for all. I'm going to give Obama some props on something. Obamacare should have went further. And Obamacare, yes, the defects of Obamacare are showing, meaning with the high copays and everything else, and even being so cumbersome that Republicans can take the legs out of it to exacerbate the issues that are associated with it. That said, it broke the public consciousness on healthcare. Meaning, up until the point with the Affordable Care Act, this idea of having a national healthcare system in America was not on the table. Nobody even talked about it. That was farcical. Oh, you're being a radical by saying everybody should have healthcare, you bastard. How dare you be so radical? And so the Affordable Care Act, to some degree, cracked the public consciousness on this issue. Meaning the Overton window shifted. It wasn't if Americans could have socialized medicine. The Republican Party had screamed at the top of their lungs that the Affordable Care Act was socialized medicine. There were going to be death panels. People were going to be driven out and poked with guns and whatnot in order to get health care. Like, some of the fear-mongering on this stuff was utter nonsense. But they ran with it. Here's the catch. If you continuously call what is essentially privatized health care and a giveaway to the healthcare insurance companies socialized medicine and the government takeover of healthcare, well, maybe a government takeover of healthcare is not that scary anymore, seeing as you've continuously screamed at it. Meaning this kind of the sky is falling, and after a while nobody looks at the fact that the sky is falling. If you call it that, and it's not that, you're inoculating the public on that issue if the public is not going to take you seriously with it. Meaning if the public doesn't believe you, the public thinks you're lying about it. The moment that Obamacare starts to fail, and you've told the people that this is universal health care and all this other stuff, they start thinking, maybe universal health care is not that bad. I mean, after all, the amount of money, the cost of health care outside of Obamacare increased higher than inside Obamacare, meaning even though it's somewhat of a broken system, it's still better than the system that preceded it. And Trump care was going to be a worse and shittier version than Obamacare. And Sanders comes along and says, look, we can do health care, but we can't do it if we still keep in healthcare insurance companies and drug companies and allowing them to maximize their profit at the expense of your illnesses and your fuck-ups and your foibles. You have cancer, pay me. Pay me for your cancer. You have AIDS, pay me. And you end up in this exploitive relationship where healthcare insurance companies and drug companies are putting money in the pockets of politicians to keep laws on the books that allow the services that you pay for to be more expensive. Meaning, you pay twice as much as everywhere else in the world, but you pay twice as much not because you use healthcare more, but because of policies, not acts of God, policies, rules, laws, things that allow them to essentially rape you over the coals in order to make a profit off of your injury and illness. It doesn't have to be that way. That's my point. Tulsi Gabbard support Medicare for all. Strongly supports Medicare for all. Great for Tulsi. Stephanie Chateau, did you see Tulsi agree with Chomsky? A good sign. This Stephanie, this page is a lefty wish list. I like it. I love it. At least what I've seen so far. TPP. Hardworking Americans have suffered and lost their jobs and livelihoods as a consequence of large trade agreements like NAFTA. Tulsi strongly stood against the TPP on the basis that it would hurt American workers while boosting the profits of large multinational banks and corporations. Tulsi would limit America's ability to protect our environment. TPP would limit our ability for America to protect its environment, protect against outsourcing, and compete with countries that have lower labor standards and costs. I saw Ben Shapiro do this thing talking about capitalism, how awesome it is because it lowers costs. Missing the point that in lowering costs, it's like the high cost of being able to buy some low item for Walmart. If you're continuously lowering the costs like that, you realize that American workers are competing against other countries that have very low worker standards. Meaning, if this guy is paid $15 an hour in the United States, and this other country, they can pay $3 an hour. All the incentives in the world for that company or corporation to leave and go to that place that is paying $3 an hour. Now you can say these are horrible people for making that decision to do so, but you've created a system that incentivizes them to do so. And these trade deals allow those things to take place. Meaning, the moment that guy's outsourced that job, when that company is there, do you believe that he's going to stop selling his products in the United States? They are not. That trade deal is going to allow them to import those products back into the country without any tariffs or anything else. Meaning, not only did they outsource that job, they're selling you those products. And people may say, wow, we got this product at a great price. Yeah, for that great price, that American worker has lost his job. Those corporations have left this country. Meaning you got your low price, but there's a cost for that low price. There's no magical door. The TPP was going to exacerbate that process. In exchange for just 0.15% boost to GDP in 2032, the TPP would decimate American manufacturing capacity, increase our trade deficit, ship American jobs overseas, and result in losses of 16 to 25 U.S. economic sectors. Go Obama! Go Obama. He said that was the most progressive trade deal. Most is relative, right? Built into the framing of the term is relative. Let's see, Syria. Where is, let me see, environment. Let's go to environment. Climate change. Tulsi is the top leader in fighting for the urgent action on the address climate change. Tulsi's aggressive OFF Fossil Fuels Act has been endorsed by over 400 national, state, and local organizations, including Progressive Democrats of America, the Climate Justice Alliance, Food and Water Watch, People's Action Institute, Indigenous Environmental Network, Blue Planet Foundation, and National Nurses United. Wow. The OFF Act transitions the United States to 100% clean and renewable energy by 2035. This includes provision to stimulate the economy and transition workers to top and renewable job sectors. Tulsi supports the Green New Deal. One catch with that, and one interesting factoid or oddity to that. If you do that, meaning if the country goes into this kind of Marshall Plan in order to transition into green energy, great. But just understand, in the very process of that, you're going to increase the amount of carbon because there's going to be a ramping up period before the green energy gets a hold, meaning you have to build it. In order to build it, you're going to use energy in the process of building it. I mean, if you're talking about this kind of Marshall Plan all across the United States, in the process and ramping up, you're going to break the carbon ceilings that you're trying to hit. After that, however, you may be able to bring those down because at that point you're using green energy and not continuously using the oil and fossil fuels. My point is, the Green New Deal the transitioning off is good, But we also need to be aware that there are problems even in the transition process that needs to be paid attention to. And again, a list of all the things associated with this. I mean, the website is awesome. She has stuff on everything. Let's go to campaign finance. The Supreme Court Citizens United decision opened the floodgates for dark money into politics, tainting the integrity of democracy. I love that. Democracy itself has been tainted. Tulsi recognizes campaign finance reform is essential to bring the power back to the people in our democracy. She's fighting to get Super PAC out of our elections and limit campaign contributions so wealthy don't have an unfair advantage over our electoral process. Limit dark money by forcing transparency of outside groups, corporations, and wealthy donors. Enforce and prosecute violations of campaign laws. That's a big one. Making voting accessible. That's another big one, meaning a voting holiday. Meaning the moment that you're born, you're signed up to vote. Meaning there's certain things. Meaning transparency. Meaning when people make that vote, you know who you voted for and it can be verifiable. Not, we believe that this took place. But getting money out of politics is big. Capitalism and democracy do not sit easily beside one another. In one case, you have a small percent, like a 1%, dictating what takes place over thousands of individuals. That 1% is also able to accrue large amounts and vast amounts of wealth and use that vast amounts of wealth to interact within the political space itself, meaning the democratic order of things. The democratic order of things has a large number of people who are in the political space who may not necessarily have economic might, but do, in movements or in coordination, have the potential to change the way the economic order of things is arranged. The capitalistic system does not want the governmental system infringing upon what it considers to be this kind of infringement of sorts. Mind you, they breathe our air, they use our roads, they use our police force, they use our fire department, they use our workers, but they don't necessarily want to get back to that process. The democratic process has the ability to restrain, restrict, and control the capitalistic process. The other way around is also true. What you have is an oligarchical system where a top 1% invests large amounts of money into the political space in order to get favors, to move the ball increments to the right. People born into the system believes that that system is perfectly normal and natural because that's all they ever know. And get 20, 30 years down the line, you have a fundamentally different system, a political revolution where the top 1% has been able to get its hooks into the democratic order of things in a way where the candidates who are up for election are not serving the will of the population itself, but instead are serving the will of the people who are putting dollars in their pockets. That needs to change. Part of the way that needs to change is dealing with electoral politics of making sure that people are being bought. And right now, we don't have that. Talking about tainting the integrity of the democracy is a massive understatement. Let's keep going. I mean, there's a few of these. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's a few that I want to show. I think I did foreign policy. All right, let's do let's do Syria. As part of long-standing efforts to end regime change war policy, Tulsi strongly opposed the illegal wars to arm, fund, and train terrorist-aligned rebels in Syria and overthrow Assad. Yes! Yes! Full-throated, no hedge. He's a butcher, he's a bad guy, he's an animal. But none of that. This is policy from the standpoint of the United States. And it is a worse outcome to try to overthrow Assad and allow people, essentially, killers, rapists, and essentially terrorists, to take over that country in the same way that the other countries were set on fire. Yes, good. Tulsi has emphasized the need to have a clear plan and look at all possible outcomes before going to war. Too many times the United States has rushed into regime change wars without intelligent analysis of the potential effects. I don't think they cared about the analysis of the potential effects, if I'm being honest. Let's see. Human rights in Syria will be absolutely crushed if Assad is removed and Al-Qaeda, ISIS are allowed to take over and establish a caliphate in Syria, which is what will happen if we attempt to topple a dictator. Assad succeeds. Attempt to dictator topple Assad succeeds. Oh, I see. Essentially if Assad loses. Let's go to Russia. In January 2017, Tulsi co-sponsored the first legislative initiatives to investigate Russian influence in the 2016 election. Tulsi voted for sanctions against Russia in H.R. 3364 in response to their incessant cyber attacks involved in the Syrian civil war and evasion of previous sanctions. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. On this one is a fail. Because you can't say, I'm sanctioning them for their involvement in the Syrian civil war on this page, but then on the other page, when you're talking about Syria, you make this point. Tulsi has long emphasized, I have a clear plan, right. Human rights in Syria will be absolutely crushed if Assad is removed and Al-Qaeda and ISIS are allowed to take over and establish a caliphate. If it wasn't for Russia, Assad would have been toppled and they would have established a caliphate. So how are you putting sanctions on Russia for intervening in something that you said that you wanted the outcome anyway? You can't have it both ways. I'm just saying. I understand, hypocrisy in politics is supposedly a minor sin, but I don't know why. Tulsi strongly believes that the United States and United Nations have a duty to defend the sovereignty of the Ukraine from Russia. Russia's invasion, occupation, and further threats are extreme danger to the Ukrainian self-determination. What is also a threat to Ukrainian self-determination is if we are intervening into the affairs of the Ukraine. If Tulsi may have forgotten this, but it was the United States and Western powers' intervention into the Ukraine that fomented a revolution in that country in the first place. Let's be very clear on this. Yes, it's easy to hit Russia for political expedience, but the reality of it is that we intervened in the Ukraine. We were supporting the opposition. We were perfectly okay with a revolution in the Ukraine. Not so much in France, but we were perfectly okay with this level of revolution in the Ukraine. We spurred it on. We cheered it on. Rah, rah, because it was against the government that was aligned with Russia. Is there anything in this document that puts sanctions on us for intervening into the affairs of the Ukraine in the first place? The secondary revolution, where Russia was talking about little green men, yeah, but let's be very clear that the first revolution was an intervention into Ukrainian politics by the United States and Western powers. Just saying. I'm less liking this aspect of the document, clearly. Tulsi strongly opposed illegal CIA funding, training, and weapons for extremist elements in Syria who are fighting both the Syrian government and their ally of Russia. The United States' illegal war to depose Assad in Syria brings the United States into direct conflict with Russia and simultaneously empowered extremists in Syria. Are we talking about the Russian one? Syria one? Okay. See, funding, right. This is true. Yes. Continued U.S. involvement in Syria can potentially escalate conflict between U.S. and Russia, which is extremely dangerous and unnecessary. That is also true. Yes. There's something about this one that's bothering me. I don't remember what it is. Opposes illegal CIA funding, training, and weapons for extremist rebels in Syria who are fighting both the Syrian government and their ally of Russia. Well, the extremist rebels in Syria, who are fighting both the Syrian government and their ally, right? The U.S. illegal wars to depose Assad in Syria to bring Russia into direct conflict with Russia and simultaneously oppose extremists in Syria. That is true. Since we're paying them, I guess it does empower them in a way. India, this is a point that people will care about, right? As a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, whose responsibility is to meet with the foreign diplomats, Tulsi has met with leaders of India to promote India trade, tourism, information technology, as well as defense and counterterrorism. Tulsi has worked diligently to promote the United States, Hawaii's interest in meetings with India, creating a historic sister-state relationship between Goa, India, and Hawaii. In meeting of Modi, you must understand, in political documents are almost written like legal documents, and done in almost a chess way, pressed into political space. Meaning, when they say things in these documents, they're said in a way that tries to avoid flack and avoid themselves being hit. But sometimes you have to say things. Meaning, in order for your base to be jazzed up about something that you're pushing or something that you're doing, you have to actually say it, even though you're going to be hit for saying it. Meaning, have you ever been hit in the face by a man, and have you ever been hit a man in the face? You have to be willing to take that hit. At the same token, the thing that you're saying to some degree is a hit in and of itself, if that makes sense. There's no protection. There is no safety. All of these perspectives in some degree are relative to others, and all of them are going to be used for political hit points. Meaning people are going to try to use what you say to take you down, whether there's reality to what you're saying or not. I'm saying that poorly. What you're saying is written like a lawyer because you're going to be attacked based on what you say, and the words are going to be picked apart. And sometimes they try to get across meanings that are not in what you're saying. So right here, so the Modi part. She knows she's going to be hit for Modi. So however she writes this, she has to write this in a way that's somewhat defensive in order to prevent the fact that she's going to get hit for Modi. As part of her diplomatic work, Tulsi met with India Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And this is at the very end, if you notice. This is not something she put at the top. Their meeting focused on enhanced cooperation in the fight against Islamic terrorism, working together to protect the environment and maximizing economic opportunities between the two countries. Don't know what that means. Tulsi meeting with Modi was part of her congressional responsibility as a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Those who criticize Tulsi's meeting and attribute Indian politics to Tulsi attribute Modi's politics to Tulsi, etc., because Tulsi and Modi both happen to be Hindu. Yo, I don't like this part. And had a professional diplomatic meeting are clearly plagued by the severe case of anti-Hindu bigotry, which goes completely against the spirit of the aloha that Tulsi is constantly working to promote. Here's the problem with this. And this reeks of me of kind of the Clinton stuff of, if you don't back my campaign, you're sexist and racist. And she's looking for a way to defend what people are making a tether to what she seems to be in the bag for Modi. Modi did bad things. I mean, let's, come on. Even if they don't want to say that Modi told somebody to do X, Modi clearly was around and it was put in the best light, deficient in dealing with the crisis that took place, meaning those thousands of people being killed, many of which being Muslim. This wasn't just, people making this up. The United States had blocked Modi from coming into the country. I mean, this was real. The international community had looked at this particular way, and it wasn't because he was a Hindu. Let's be very clear on that. Meaning, it wasn't a religious belief. It was actions that took place in objective reality that adversely affected thousands of people. And by adversely affected, I mean they lost their life. I don't like this trying to hide behind religious stuff, because there is a such thing as religious bigotry. There are people who are hateful and racist and sexist and all those things. Yes. But that is not necessarily the reason why people are hitting you for this, for the connection between those two things. That's all. There's a difference in those things, and I'm not sure if I like this hiding behind being Hindu any more than I like the hiding behind being black or or of a particular race or whatever else. It's like, come on, let's be honest. There are real things associated with it, so I'm not just blowing it away. I'm just kind of making this point that the issues with Modi are things that took place in objective reality. It's not what he believes. People's actions are governed by what they believe. But in this case, it's not just what he believes in an authorial sense. It's the active thing that took place that he was either responsible for or grossly negligent in doing something about. And yeah, it just does seem like there was a connection between her, that she tended to like the guy. And this was before he was in prime minister. That needs to be owned. Like, clearly, I like Tulsi. Otherwise, I don't think I would be fully going through this in this way. But that particular link is somewhat detestable to me. Let's keep going. But by the way, but she's not wrong in saying, you got to be fair. You can't say you love Hillary Clinton and turn around and hit Tulsi Gabbard for a connection with Modi when Clinton and Obama were just as connected to him. So, let's be honest. Regime change wars, of course, and that's one of her strongest sticking points. When she's in a debate, I'm eagerly looking forward to her being on that debate stage, bringing up these issues of being anti-war. All right, GMO labeling, I even like that. All right, I'm going to leave this because I have an interview coming up at 5 that I need to get ready for. But I think you get the gist of it. I'm putting her link at the bottom. Oh, what is this? PopulationMatters.org. Have them on your show. Knock Bumblewick. Thank you. Thank you for your support. I appreciate it. And I'll look them up. Population matters.org. I hope we're not talking about the population of the planet or of a society. I mean, yes, it matters, but between you have all the technical acumen to make sure everyone on this planet is clothed, fed, and have a decent standard of living that exceeds the standard of living that we have now, that most people have now. And technology is your outlet for that, but you can't have that under this particular system. I guess my point is, the issue most is not necessarily population, it's the way we've organized our affairs. We've organized ourselves in a particular way where you have rampant poverty. You don't need to have rampant poverty on this planet. If we made a choice, if we made a decision, in the same way we were going through something like a war, and we said we're going to get rid of poverty, we're going to increase the standard of living, we're going to bring down the vulnerabilities of people's life, we're going to expand high-speed rail, hell, we're going to have flying cars. We can make the decision to expand our society in a technological way to get rid of the poverties and inequities between human beings within our society. We could do that. That's choice. I mean, granted, it takes a certain amount of energy to do it, so don't misunderstand me. And with that energy is usually generated by things going wrong, meaning chaos and problems. So things tend to devolve before there's a certain amount of energy in order to kind of push its way out. It's like a gravity well or ship is kind of catching up speed as it goes down and then kind of flies its way out. There's a certain amount of energy, potential energy, that's built up when there's chaos in the society. And that chaos can drive positive solutions. It can drive negative solutions too, but it can drive positive solutions. Akira the Immortal, please play chess with me, Jamarl. I would say this. If you're on the ICC, and not just on the ICC, if you get your rating up to snuff, meaning if you can at least get your rating to 1700, I would play chess with you. I would grant that. In fact, anybody on my show, and I've said that a few times. I had thought about having a segment on the show that would allow people to challenge the progressive soapbox in a chess game. I don't know how to pull it off. Yeah, I mean, granted, the thing can be shown and everything else, but that gives a magnificent incentive to not look bad. That's the first point. Second point, my rating has gone up to 1850, something like that. So I am getting better, or my game is coming back, I should say. So be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for. I'm an animal on that stuff. Uh-oh, who says this? I am a chess master. Jamal never could beat me. Whatever. I think you'd be shocked as shit. I keep telling you, man, my rating used to be a master rating in Blitz. See Knock Mumblewick's $50 donation. Yes. Please ask Grobeck to be on your show, see his podcast to know more. Yeah, fair enough. Jamal's been sandbagging. He's been 2,400 minimum. Whatever. Whatever. So my rating used to be like when I used to play chess, like play, like study and all this other stuff. And yes, you study chess because you get it's issues of logic. It's like it's logic to some degree, but it's also a human element that's difficult to program, where it's a feel for the game. You can't necessarily see everything that's going to happen 20 moves ahead. Not everybody, but what you can do is get a feel for the position of, do I think that I'm going to be able to maintain X? Do I think I can hold this while I do X or Y? Do I have winning chances? That's another one. Because if you don't have winning chances, trying to win a one game could give you a lost game. Like, the game is phenomenal, man. It's a phenomenal game, especially in this thing of trying to understand. Like, I sometimes I forget how bound my psychology is to the game. only because I started playing it when I was like 12, and I've been playing it ever since. And after being in tournaments ever since you're a kid, like playing in adult tournaments from the time you're a kid to the time you're in your like 30s, your worldview shifts in this way, where things become action and consequence, and you start looking at things. I don't know. Your worldview changes, like the way you look at events start having a different significance to it. There's an emotional the emotion somewhat drains away from it sometimes. You start looking at it just as forms and what you're trying to accomplish and what do you need to do to get to from point A to point B. It's fascinating. It's fucking fascinating. 12th dimensional tic-tac-toe. I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's that bad. Alright, I'm going to end this. LGBT. Let's do that one first. I keep making this joke that if Tulsi really wants to pander to the LGBTQ community and really get it across, she needs to have a fling on camera or something. Just tongue kiss some woman on camera. Problem solved. They were like, yeah, but she didn't really have it in her heart when she was sticking her tongue down that woman's throat. Tulsi recently released a video affirming her deep commitment to fighting for equality and protecting our LGBTQ community. Tulsi is a vocal advocate for equality of our LGBTQ community. Here's the thing. My issue with Tulsi is not necessarily on this particular issue because everybody has their issues. Meaning, the medical thing is a red line for me for obvious reasons. Not just for myself, but, family member, whether it's my mom, my uncle, my cousin, identify those things through, I'm an Aries moon. I identify that stuff through somewhat of a selfish lens of I. But that I usually gets applied to the world in regards to how do other people regard it. So the origins of it is somewhat selfish, but it's used in somewhat of a humanitarian way. But in this case, the LGBTQ thing, I'm not gay, so it doesn't directly affect me in this way. Even though this is not something I'm willing to give ground on. Meaning, this is a red line for me also. Somebody being sexist, racist, bigoted, homophobic, anti-Semitic, those are red lines. I can see that from the standpoint of my own history in this country, and that can be applied to others, and I don't necessarily want that applied to others. Meaning, I don't want others to have to endure unfairness based on who they are or who they fall in love with. That's a red line for me. There's a solidarity with me among all of the either ethnic groups or however you want to break those things up on that. So when I look at this issue with Tulsi on the LGBTQ community, it bothered me. She didn't just seem to be in a religious thing. She seemed to be aggressively against the community itself. Even though I don't have issue with this because, I don't have this belief that Tulsi Gabbard is going to get in office and then turn into Mike Pence. I don't think you lose ground on this. In fact, you probably even gain ground on this particular issue. But there's a problem. Tulsi, in one of her interviews, kind of made this point that, her views hasn't necessarily changed, but, she realizes that her religious views can't be laid out on the rest of the country. This is okay for me because I am not gay, but for people who are gay, there's something wrong here. I mean, ultimately, they're looking at a person who they're thinking, this person thinks there's something wrong with who I am. And because this person thinks there's something wrong with who I am, even though they may pass legislation that may be to my benefit, at the end of the day, they're looking at me as if I'm defective. Nobody would want that. And understand why they wouldn't want that. I was watching the Humanist Report as he was talking about this. I can perfectly understand why somebody would take great issue with thinking that somebody thinks that they're defective as a human being. So, I don't fault anybody for looking at this particular issue and say that they don't necessarily like Tulsi Gabbard because they think Tulsi Gabbard hates gays. She doesn't. I don't think she does. But if she's harboring something inside, my problem is I can't blame her for something that she's picked up as this kind of odd, defective programming. By the same token, is she going to do anything about it in an objective world that's going to be to the detriment of the people who she's talking about? The answer, of course, I think is no. Which is why, this is the thing that allows me to say she gets a pass on this particular issue because I don't think she's going to do anything negative on this issue, while simultaneously accepting the problems associated with people who may look at her and say, well, you think I'm defective as a human being, and I'm uncomfortable with that. Both things are true, if that makes sense. This becomes an issue of choice, and which one you think carries the day and where you want to go with it. Which one is more important? Trip Samuel, what do you think about the video where Julian Assange implies Selfridge is the source? Also, the conflation of state media using the word hack, not leak. So I've talked about that one before, Trip Samuel. The media has done everything that they could to avoid dealing with that issue. I think it makes all the sense in the world that look, between this grand conspiracy of the Russian government doing some kind of hack or something, as opposed to somebody who's working at the DNC that may leak it, I think the leak makes more sense as opposed to a hack. People conflate this idea of bringing up the fact that it is possible that somebody who worked for the DNC leaked documents from the DNC. They conflate that with saying that Hillary Clinton had the guy whacked. It's utter nonsense. You can make a point of saying, well, look, it makes all the sense in the world that if somebody works for the DNC, they may have gotten their hands on information from the DNC. That's the first point. The second point, Julian Assange kind of bringing that up in an interview was stark and overt. And when the interviewer caught on, it was like, well, wait a minute. Are you saying that, you had some relation with this? Well, we can't divulge our sources. Well, you just did. Now, either Julian Assange is making that up, which I don't believe he's making that up, or there is something there. But it's something there that they've completely ignored. There's one guy, probably more, but one guy on the planet that knows where he got the information from, and that's Julian Assange. And that is the person who they're not asking and they're not listening to in regards to any level of honest investigation on the election. Just saying. That's what I think about it. I think Julian Assange is a worthy source. Has never lied, at least in the context of publishing stuff for WikiLeaks. What he does as a person may be something different, but he hasn't lied, or WikiLeaks has never published anything wrong. Yeah, I think it's a big deal, especially when the details or when the research goes with this idea that it was a leak, not a hack. So, yeah, that's a good piece of that's an awesome video. I know the exact video you're talking about. I've even shown it. Let's see. Oh, you did it twice. Also, the conflation between state media. The media is pushing a narrative. And that narrative essentially is Donald Trump colluded with the Russians in order to win the election, to dethrone Hillary Clinton. For the last 2 years, they've ran with that narrative. In running with that narrative for the last 2 years, they've not been able to show the narrative, meaning they've not been able to prove the narrative. They've tried any and everything that they could to try to prove that narrative. They tried to link Manafort with these dodgy documents that nobody could back up, and at this point, people just considered fake. The media doesn't look at the fact that people were publishing fake documents when they're going through their stories and saying, why are people publishing fake documents to try to create a link between the Trump administration and Julian Assange? Why do you need to create that link? If you're just doing your due diligence of reporting, shouldn't that link just pop up naturally? Not so much. Mueller has been putting people in prison, but none of it has any relation to Donald Trump and Russia. The entire premise of the investigation was that Trump somehow colluded with Russia for the election. And they've so far slid away from that to finding anything that they can hit Trump and connection between Trump and Russia on. The term hack is a slippery one. What does it mean? What does it mean? Does somebody go into a computer and change votes? Nope. But that's the common use of the word hack, but that's not the way the word is being used in our political space. This word has become this kind of slippery slope of catch-all in order to try to create some nefarious link between Donald Trump and the Russians. If you tell me that Donald Trump has some kind of business relationship with the Russians, I can believe that. If you tell me that Donald Trump was trying to get some kind of building done, he thought he was going to lose the presidency, and so he was lying about association between a business thing, I can even believe that. Because everybody thought Donald Trump was going to lose that race, including Donald Trump himself, which means he didn't want to throw a business deal away for what he considered to be a lost cause. So I can believe that, but that's not where all this originated. All this originated from Donald Trump somehow colluding with the Russians, and that case has not been proven at all. That has been, for all intents and purposes, a conspiracy theory. So just saying. this term hack has become this kind of slippery catch-all that they use to attack him, kind of like calling Obama Muslim. It's just what they say. It's not necessarily what they have. Accrued the immortal. How many times do I have to ask? You mean to play chess? Well, like I said, go onto the ICC, and if you can get your rating up to at least 1,700, you got a game. Free of charge. You got a game. All right. Let's see. Who else is here? Clad Illusion. Yes. I've seen Jamal's hand disappear up Tulsi's skirt. You have. That's funny. She killed him. Guilty. Octazen, I think you double stuff. She did whack him. Yeah, I like the term whack. The term whack him sounds funny to me. The Order of Chaos. The mainstream media still covered Stormy Daniels 200 times while ignoring the water and Flint. Isn't that amazing? You must understand, media is a company, or they're companies. They have fiduciary responsibilities. Their goal is to maximize profit just like other companies. It's just they're maximizing profit in this kind of commodification of reality. Well, at that point, reality is a shapeable, malleable thing. And sometimes it's not the stories that they cover, it's also the stories that they don't cover. Because oftentimes the stories that they cover is a way of blocking out stories that they should cover, but covers that would adversely turn up the apple cart. Mainstream media is a preservation of the natural order of things in the way that things are, meaning status quo. They're not these things that are outside the system. They are firmly within the system and keep the system the way it is. The Vietnam War cannot sustain itself if media didn't go along with it. The Iraq War couldn't sustain itself if media couldn't go along with it. If the water in Flint, Michigan could not remain leaded if the mainstream media focused on that story. Catch of the matter is they're looking for stories that are profitable, not stories that are necessary for the public or things that the public needs to know. Oftentimes, there's a difference in those things. You get, hey, Donald Trump paid money to a porn star, or to get to pay money, bribe the porn star, as opposed to, hey, the water in this area, that area, and these other people's areas that they're drinking, that their kids are drinking, are laced with lead. I mean, yeah, I feel you on this. It's amazing. Clyde, I want to meet Tulsi in her Oval Office. I want to meet Tulsi in her Oval Office too. Maybe, it depends. Actually, I want to see Bernie Sanders in the Oval Office. If not Bernie, maybe Tulsi. Jamal is going to be late for his interview. Keep that stereotype going. Actually, I tend to do pretty good with getting on my interviews, even though I'm going to end this because I have an interview at 5 o'clock. But I tend to be pretty good with those interviews and getting there on time and making sure that people are... I tend to be good at it. And the reason I tend to be good at it, I think it's one of those things of... when it's something that you're self-directing and something that you're interested in, you tend to be a little bit better at it, as opposed to just doing something for the benefit of somebody else. Oh, Shucky Ducky himself. Shucky Ducky. I remember him. That's ancient. Let's see. Is there anybody else here? Bob. Bob is laughing. Bite a few ears. All right. I'll end this here. Absolutely nothing about racism. Major blind spot. Let's see. Is that true? LGBT marijuana legalization, keeping families together. Islam and LGBT are there because she's being hit on it pretty hard, so I can totally expect that to be there. Immigration, you're right, I don't see race. Civil liberties, maybe. No, that's not it either. Yeah, that's a blind spot. Yeah, you're right. That's a blind spot. You have some people who are firmly within the context of race. In the same way, you have people firmly in the context of, like a gay community. She's going to get dinged for that. Dapple is there. Even Dapple is there. Even Dapple gets a block. How does Dapple get a block and I don't get a block, Tulsi? I don't get a block. Yeah, that's a miss. That's a miss. But nevertheless, overall, I like it. Like I said, it's a lefty grab bag of things that, for the most part, lefties are gonna gravitate towards and like. As for How her being in office would affect any in politics, I have no idea. And how that would impinge upon American politics, I have no idea. But looking at this from the standpoint of policy and issues, I like it. So I'll leave this here. This one is going long, but I hope it has been informative. I wanted to go through some of the items. Thanks all. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal or Patreon. I'll see you in a few.